All right, welcome back to F-Tag Journal. This is F560-Right to refuse transfer. Table of contents, overview, citation history, interpretive guidelines, surveyors, actual citations, and usually go over the summary. But on this one, because it is so short, we're going to skip the overview and the summary. So jump right into the citation history. So in 2018, F560 was only cited 8 times. In 2019, it was cited 9 times. So not a big concern. 62.5% of the citations were from an annual survey. As far as scope and severity, there was one G-level citation. Everything else was E or below. And with only 8 citations, you're not going to see anything unique in the state distribution. Same with the least and most cited states as a percentage of their facilities. So what does the interpretive guidelines say? Well, this F-tag, F560, is about the right to refuse transfer to another room within the facility. And there's a caveat to that, which is if the purpose of the transfer is from a SNF to a non-SNF, or from a nursing facility to a SNF, or if the purpose of the transfer is for the convenience of the staff. So the main element of this F-tag is it's balancing the residents' rights with ensuring that the facility is getting paid for the services they provide. So in a lot of facilities, what you have is, and I shouldn't say a lot, there are facilities out there that have a distinct part, which is just Medicaid, and another distinct part, which is just Medicare, right? So if they're in Medicaid, and all of a sudden they have an acute illness and they need Medicare, they would typically have to be moved to the other part of the facility and ensure that they are basically the facility is being reimbursed and paid for their care through Medicare. So the resident can refuse that, but there are financial consequences, and we'll go through this slide and hopefully I can spell them out correctly to you. So the resident can refuse that transfer, that relocation. If they do, then it is the responsibility of the staff and the facility to ensure that the resident or family representatives understand what the financial consequences are of refusing that transfer. So if there's any change in the Medicare or Medicaid eligibility because of where they are basically refusing to transfer to, then they have to inform them of those changes in eligibility. So of course the resident can pay privately if they don't want to move and they got a ton of money. Let's say they're not on Medicare, not on Medicaid, or even if their family has money but they don't and they qualify for Medicaid, they can stay there. But if they are unable to pay, then the facility has to give a notice of discharge before they can move them to the other part of the facility that has the appropriate certification for their new payer source. And hopefully I've made that clear. And of course, the resident can refuse a transfer based on just convenience of staff or ease of care. And the example, kind of a vague example given in the interpretive guidelines, is if resident all of a sudden has a increase in care needs, or they've developed some sort of condition, and it's easier for the staff to move that resident to another part of the facility that has residents that have similar types of needs, and the resident doesn't want to do that. They like their room, they get it all set up that they like, then the resident can refuse that transfer and the facility cannot force them. So what are the surveyors going to look for? Well, there's really only 3 things that the interpretive guidelines told them to look for, which is, was the resident moved due to a change in payer source, were they moved for staff convenience, and was the resident given an opportunity to refuse the transfer. So the easiest way to get through this one is to just basically document in the record, whether it's social services, even the admissions coordinator if they're doing any sort of bed management, or whoever does the documentation, or the nurses. Just make sure that you're documenting that the resident was okay with the room transfer, and I would definitely get them to sign off something on paper, scan it into the record. So there is some cross-tagging potential. F559, which is notification of roommate change. That's also a room change. F582, which is Medicare and Medicaid coverage, F620, which is admission, transfer, and discharge rights. So here are the actual citations. Resident was moved and was completely unaware of their right to refuse. Resident was moved to a long-term care unit without consent. Resident moved to a long-term care unit to make room for a new skilled nursing facility admit. Resident was moved out of a large room so 2 obese residents could be admitted. There was no consent for that transfer. Resident was moved to a security unit to open up a room for a new admit. Resident was forced to move as facility was making a therapy hall. And on the G-level citation, the surveyor found that the resident exhibited emotional distress related to a move on the long-term care unit. So as you read through this citation on the 2567, they did have a consent form signed. However, there was a bunch of contradicting nurses' notes that said they were having a great deal of difficulty with the move to the long-term care unit. So not uncommon for nursing notes to be sort of the thread or string to pull on from the surveyors that sort of unravel the whole sweater, so to speak, and end up with a citation. So that is F560, right to refuse transfer.